All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children. Men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts, the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendis est. Logos of Creation. Think, Speak, Act, written by Conrad Riker. Available now, links in description. Logos of Creation. A field guide for men who still notice reality. The solipsistic caesure, destroying the Marxist psychosis of speciesship, reclaiming the biomechanical reality of the male pelvis, and exposing the infantile ingratitude of a parasite riding a train built by men. I once shared a flight from Chicago to Boston with a woman who spent 45 minutes writing in a journal about how the man in 14B had colonized her emotional airspace. I know this because she was writing furiously, mouth set in that peculiar grimace of righteous agony that has become the default expression of an entire generation. And when she went to the lavatory, the journal sat open on her tray table like a proclamation. The man's crime: he had fallen asleep and his elbow had drifted 3 inches past the armrest. He was unconscious. He was dreaming. He was, according to her meticulous documentation, committing ambient violence against her somatic sovereignty. I sat there in 14D, nursing a terrible coffee and a worse hangover, watching the clouds roll past, and I thought, we have officially lost the plot. We have taken the most durable, magnificent, logos-driven civilization in human history, one that charted the stars, split the atom, and built the 140,000 miles of steel rail that make Amtrak's underfunded existence possible, and handed its cultural operating manual to people who believe a stranger's glance at a probiotic bottle constitutes low grade. Theft. The Romans had a word for this kind of soft, self-devouring madness: decadencia, meaning a falling away, a decline, a civilization so comfortable it begins to mistake its own neuroses for moral crusades. The word sovereignty comes from the Latin superanus, supreme above all, the highest authority. It is a word that belongs to kings and nations, to the grand juridical tradition of Western civilization, to the mixed constitution and the careful balance of powers that men fought and died to establish. And this woman, this Maeve, with her probiotics and her memory foam and her desperate need to believe the universe revolves around her cortisol levels, has claimed it for herself on a mid-grade Amtrak seat. She is not sovereign. She is a passenger on a train built almost entirely by men, mined by men, engineered by men, forged by men who died in industrial accidents at rates that would make this gender studies scholar faint clean away. Men are the only net lifetime taxpayers in every developed nation on earth. Women, on aggregate, draw more from the state than they contribute. Maeve did not purchase sovereign territory. She bought a ticket subsidized by the very demographic she blames for her spatial debt, a pseudo-intellectual fiction so absurd it would make Marx himself blush. I am going to take this article apart, not with feelings. Her feelings are the problem, an endlessly manufactured crisis that demands the world shrink to accommodate her panic, but with logos. Grammar first, we will define terms, trace etymologies, and expose the linguistic sleight of hand that turns a glance into theft and discomfort into genocide. Logic second, we will construct the syllogisms she could not distinguish harm from offense with Thomistic precision. and demonstrate that her entire thesis collapses under the weight of its own contradictions. Rhetoric, third, we will make the truth memorable, because the truth is the only cure for this particular species of madness. The smoke alarm in her head is not a survival apparatus. It is a broken appliance shrieking at a phantom fire, and the entire therapeutic industrial complex exists to tell her the alarm is brave rather than defective. A civilization that pathologizes the anatomical reality of the sex that built it, that demands men contract their bodies and their presence to soothe the bottomless neuroses of women who will never be satisfied, is a civilization in the grip of what can only be called a satanic inversion. The chthonic helix that replaces creation with complaint, merit with grievance, and the good, the true, and the beautiful with the pathetic spectacle of a grown woman on a train, clutches her probiotics and calls it resistance.
Buncombe article by a feminist PhD. The Invisible Caesura, Why His 3 Inches Are Everything. How toothpaste, probiotics and a seat cushion explain the patriarchal colonization of women's very space. By Dr. Winona, feminist, Marxist PhD. I want you to imagine something mundane. A woman, I'll call her Maeve, is boarding a cross-country Amtrak. She carries 3 objects: travel toothpaste, Colgate, white, 0.8 ounces, the kind you can bring through TSA without incident. A bottle of probiotic capsules she takes because antibiotics destroyed her microbiome last spring, and a memory foam seat cushion she purchased after reading that prolonged sitting disproportionately affects pelvic floor health in people with uteruses. These objects are unremarkable. Their unremarkability is precisely the point. Maeve finds her seat. She arranges her objects. She is settling into what should be sovereign territory, a purchased seat, a contractually delineated space. Then he arrives. He is not remarkable either. That is also the point. He sits beside her. His knee enters what I call her somasphere, the invisible but neurologically real perimeter of bodily autonomy that every woman carries and every system ignores. His elbow crosses the armrest. His gaze, even briefly, touches her probiotic capsules on the tray table, and in that glance is a small but structurally significant act of what I am naming spatianship. The patriarchal practice of treating women's spatial, emotional, and attentional territory as inherently public, inherently available, inherently his. Spatianship, noun. The implicit patriarchal assumption that women's attention, space, and emotional labor are unclaimed resources awaiting extraction. You haven't heard this word before. You will hear it again. I ask you to sit with it, let it irritate, like a mote behind the eyelid. That irritation is cognitive restructuring. That is the feeling of a paradigm entering your body. The 3 objects as test case. Consider the travel toothpaste. Small, regulated, compliant. Maeve followed every rule. She compressed herself into 0.8 ounces of acceptable presence. This is what women are trained to do, to minimize, to compress, to make themselves TSA compliant in every domain of existence. And yet, when the man beside her spreads his legs into the classic man-spread configuration, his spatial entitlement is not regulated. No one asks him to reduce. No agent approaches with a ruler. His comfort is assumed. Hers is negotiated. The probiotic capsules represent interior sovereignty. Maeve is healing from a medical system that routinely dismisses women's pain, under-researches female bodies, and prescribes without consideration for long-term microbiome health. She takes 18 billion CFUs daily to rebuild what institutional negligence destroyed. Her internal landscape is under repair. And into this already vulnerable system, the man beside her introduces his presence, his breathing, his cologne, his casual ownership of shared air, as though it were neutral. It is not neutral. Research on female negativity bias, correctly understood not as a deficit, but as an evolved early warning system calibrated by millennia of male violence, shows that women's bodies process ambient male presence as potential. Threat, her cortisol elevates. Her probiotic colonization competes with stress hormones. His entitlement is literally reshaping her gut. And the seat cushion. Maeve bought it because the world does not accommodate female bodies. Chairs are designed for male hip angles. Public transportation assumes male proportions. She carries her own comfort because the system will not provide it. When the man beside her sees the cushion, does he recognize it as evidence of structural failure? Or does he see a woman who is high maintenance, who dares to need more than the bare minimum she has been allotted? The cushion is an object. The perception of it is a moral test. And here we approach the deeper pathology. The replacement of shared values with moral tests. We no longer live in a society bound by shared values. We live in one structured by moral tests, tests administered almost exclusively by those with patriarchal privilege, tests that women constantly fail by the act of existing while requiring space. The old social contract said, we share public space through mutual negotiation. The new reality says, men occupy, women negotiate. His 3 inches of knee spread are not a sharing violation, but a sovereignty violation. When Maeve pulls her cushion closer, when she angles her probiotics away from his line of sight, when she takes her travel toothpaste to the bathroom to avoid brushing her teeth in front of him, each micro-adjustment is a boundary tax, a small payment extracted from her autonomy to subsidize his comfort. This is how spatialship functions. It is not dramatic. It is not the violence that makes headlines. It is the ambient sequestration of women's spatial, emotional, and attentional resources by a system that treats male presence as default and female resistance as pathology. What the data shows and what it cannot show. Here is what measurable. Women report higher baseline discomfort in shared public spaces than men. Mendoza et al., 2023, Journal of Environmental Psychology. Women are 3.7 times more likely to alter their travel routes to avoid unwanted attention. Threat Architecture Project, 2022. Women describe the experience of being looked at in enclosed spaces as visceral, intrusive, a kind of low-grade theft. Here is what is not measurable: the cumulative weight of 1,000 micro-seizures. The way Maeve's body holds tension for 4 hours because the man beside her exists without apology. The way she arrives at her destination depleted, not from travel, but from spatial debt. The exhaustion of defending territory she should never have had to defend. You will say, he was just sitting there. You will say, this is public transportation. You will say, not everything is political. And in saying these things, you will demonstrate exactly the epistemic closure that spatialship requires. The refusal to see is the mechanism. Your skepticism is the shield behind which extraction continues. The paradox of female negativity bias. Let us speak plainly about what has been pathologized as negativity bias. Women's heightened sensitivity to spatial intrusion, unwanted attention, and boundary violation is not a cognitive distortion. It is a survival apparatus. It is the neurological inheritance of generations who learned, through experience, that male attention can escalate, that male presence can become male violence, that the distance between a glance and a grip is shorter than anyone wants to admit. The clinical literature frames female negativity bias as a problem to be treated, through CBT, through mindfulness, through teaching women to reframe their discomfort. This is epistemic violence. The correct intervention is not to adjust women's perceptions, but to adjust the environment that necessitates them. When a smoke alarm sounds, you do not disable the alarm, you extinguish the fire. The fire is spatialship, the alarm is women's discomfort, and the entire therapeutic industrial complex is devoted to convincing Maeve that the alarm is the problem. What is required? I am not asking for politeness. Politeness is the velvet on the cage. I am asking for spatial repatriation, the active return of territorial sovereignty to women in every domain where it has been seized. This means presumptive spatial sovereignty for women in public seating. His discomfort at contracting does not equal her discomfort at being intruded upon. A symmetry of historical harm creates a symmetry of present obligation. attention as territory. The unsolicited gaze is not neutral. Looking at a woman without her consent is a micro-extraction of her attentional resources. We recognize this in workplace harassment law. We must recognize it in everyday life. Institutional recognition of boundary tax. Every system that requires women to constantly negotiate their space, open plan offices, public transit, academic lecture halls, must account for the cumulative cost. Reduced density seating. Women's spatial design standards. The end of assuming that male proportions are default human proportions. Moral test inversion. The question is no longer, is she overreacting? The question is, what conditions make her reaction rational? When a woman clutches her probiotics closer because a man sat down, the pathology is not in her grip. It is in a world that has taught her that what she holds can be taken. Shrink the presence, expand the sovereignty. This is not a request, it is a prediction. The age of unexamined spatial entitlement is ending. The men who recognize this will find their place in the new geometry. The men who do not will find themselves increasingly uncomfortable, and they will discover, perhaps for the first time, what it feels like to have their presence treated as a problem they did not consent to have. Maeve steps off the train. Her toothpaste is used. Her probiotics are in her bag. Her cushion is under her arm. She has arrived. She is depleted, but she is here. She has paid the boundary tax levied on her body for 4 hours, and she will pay it again tomorrow, and again, and again, and the world will call this equality. I call it what it is, a slow seizure, and I am asking you to see it, because once you see specialship, you cannot unsee it, and once you cannot unsee it, you are either with the seizure or against it. There is no neutral territory. There never was. The grammar of grievance, deconstructing the spatialship solipsism, a civilization that prioritizes the hysterical delusions of a neurotic woman over the objective reality of a functioning man, is a society scheduled for the dustbin of history. I want you to imagine something utterly mundane. A man exhausted from a 60-hour work week sits down on a train. He has just paid a fortune in taxes to subsidize the very infrastructure beneath his feet, his body aching from the labor that keeps the lights on. Beside him sits a woman who has convinced herself that his mere existence is an act of psychological warfare. She looks at his knee, his elbow, his glance, and instead of seeing a tired traveler, she sees a demonic entity sent to colonize her very essence. This is not a tragedy, it is a dark comedy of solipsism. We are told that a man sitting quietly on a train is committing a slow seizure of female sovereignty. We are living in a madhouse where the inmates have been handed the bullhorn and the keys to the asylum. Let us begin with the grammar of this madness, starting with the etymology of their toxic neologisms. The writer invents the word spatialship to describe the patriarchal assumption that public space is, well, public. Let us trace the etymological corruption of her vocabulary. The word space descends from the Latin spatium, denoting an objective, measurable dimension of physical reality. It is an external fact of the natural world, governed by physics, not feelings. Sovereignty derives from the Latin superanus, meaning above, denoting supreme power or authority over a specific territory. By fusing objective physical reality with supreme royal authority, she creates a psychiatric delusion of total insulation. She demands the supreme, unchallengeable authority of a medieval monarch, but applies it to a 12-inch radius around a commuter. To claim total territorial sovereignty in a shared economy class railway carriage is not just a logical absurdity, it is epistemologically insane. Let us apply the rigors of formal logic to dismantle this delusion. Consider the categorical syllogism that obliterates the premise of spatial ownership on public transit. Major premise: public transportation is a shared, contractually delineated commons purchased via mutual ticketing. Minor premise: sovereignty requires exclusive, supreme authority over a territory. Conclusion: therefore, one cannot possess sovereignty over a public train seat. It is that simple. When you buy a ticket, you purchase a license to occupy a designated area, not a divine mandate to dictate the atmospheric pressure or the angle of your neighbor's patella. The writer whines about spatial debt and boundary tax, committing the fallacy of misplaced concreteness. She attempts to reify her subjective, abstract feelings of irritation into concrete, measurable commodities. This is a classic Marxist materialist trick, turning a literal glance into low-grade theft and an emotion into a financial debt. But debt requires a contract, a borrower, a lender, and mutually agreed terms. No such contract exists between two strangers on a train. You cannot owe a tax to a sovereign that exists only in the paranoid imagination of a woman holding probiotics. This leads us to the Thomistic distinctions required in dialectic, where we must ruthlessly separate objective harm from subjective offense. The writer uses the F5 presupposition fallacy, specifically the complex question, to manufacture a crisis. By labeling a man's innocuous glance at a bottle of pills as a micro-extraction of attentional resources, she presupposes malicious theft where none exists. Objective harm requires physical battery or the deprivation of property. Subjective offense is merely the wounded ego of a solipsist who demands the world reshape itself to accommodate her hypervigilance. Look at the real data of male disposability that the gynocentric order ignores. Men account for 93% of workplace fatalities. Men are 77% of homicide victims. Men face family courts that ruthlessly strip them of their children and assets, driving them to make up nearly 80% of all suicides. Yet we are told the true structural emergency is a woman's cortisol elevating because a man breathed in her general vicinity. A right cannot be predicated upon another's enslavement. Maeve's fabricated right to zero-stress hormones cannot logically require the state-sanctioned paralysis of the man sitting next to her. The writer has the audacity to rebrand this clinical hypervigilance as female negativity bias, celebrating it as a survival apparatus. Let us diagnose this psychiatrically. A smoke alarm that perpetually screams when there is no fire is not a survival apparatus, it is a broken appliance that needs fixing. Elevating a broken, fear-driven neurological glitch into a moral compass is an outright admission of psychological infancy. This is animus projection at its very peak. She is so possessed by her internal chaos that she projects a demonic patriarch onto the innocent man beside her, making him the scapegoat for her unhealed neuroses. The clinical literature does not frame this as a problem to be treated to oppress women. It does so because a mind constantly trapped in fight or flight over a stranger's knee angle is disconnected from reality. The therapeutic industrial complex is not trying to disable the alarm to keep women submissive. It is trying to fix the alarm because it is ringing in an empty room. If you need proof that this entire ideology is a cultic religion immune to reason, look no further than the writer's self-sealing epistemic closure. She explicitly states, the refusal to see is the mechanism. Your skepticism is the shield behind which extraction continues. This is a textbook unfalsifiable claim, violating the basic laws of dialectic and logic. If a man agrees with her, he confesses his guilt. If a man disagrees with her, his very disagreement is used as proof of his guilt. This is the recursive loop of ideological possession. It turns its adherents into NPCs who have forfeited their rational souls to the satanic hydra of cultural Marxism. They demand we abandon the true and the good to worship the ugly, hysterical feelings of a broken woman. True liberation does not come from demanding the world shrink to accommodate your paranoia. True liberation comes from aligning your mind with objective reality through the logos. We must reject their vibe-based epistemology and wield the trivium as our sword and shield. We fix the grammar, define the terms, crush their illogical syllogisms, and deliver the rhetorical killshot. We will not apologize for taking up space. We will not pay a boundary tax for the crime of existing. We will not shrink our presence to subsidize the emotional instability of women who refuse to heal their own minds. A civilization that turns its back on objective truth, merit, and the heavy burden of reality will fall. But we, the men who build, who think, who speak, and who act, will not fall with it. We will leave the hysterical women to scream at the empty seats of their self-made padded cells. To dismantle this architectural insanity, I refuse to treat female neuroses as divine revelation. Instead, I will apply the ruthless scalpel of formal logic to the rotting carcass of feminist theory. I intend to drag these manufactured grievances into the unforgiving light of the trivium, pinning down their toxic neologisms through strict grammatical definitions to expose the inescapable biomechanical reality of the male skeleton. By deploying the Thomistic distinguo to separate the accidental discomfort of a hysterical passenger from the substantive natural law of liberty, I will systematically eviscerate this delusion. I will lay bare the empirical facts of the asymmetrical tax burden and prove, through irrefutable syllogism, that a woman demanding spatial sovereignty on a male-built locomotive is not a fragile victim of oppression, but an ungrateful tyrant demanding tribute from her creators. The physics of misandry, biological reality, and the civilization tax. There is a peculiar madness that infects a civilization when it exchanges the good, the true, and the beautiful for the neurotic, the whiny, and the subsidized. Imagine, if you will, the sheer, unadulterated narcissism required to board a mechanized chariot built entirely by the sweat and blood of men, propelled along 140,000 miles of steel forged in the patriarchal fires of the Industrial Revolution, and view the mere existence of a man's kneecap as an act of colonial aggression. This is the terminal stage of the phonic helix, where objective reality is drowned in a tidal wave of subjective feminine hysteria, and where the biological necessities of the human skeleton are rebranded as tools of systemic oppression. We are asked by the high priestesses of this new dark age to believe that a woman's irritable bowel and emotional fragility possess enough gravitational mass to warp the fabric of public space, demanding the immediate subjugation of male anatomy. I submit to you that this is not sociology. It is a psychiatric emergency disguised as a political treatise. Let us apply the Thomistic distinguo to this spectacle, rigorously separating the accident of physical comfort from the substance of natural liberty. We shall grant the minor premise: yes, human beings generally prefer physical comfort while traveling. It is pleasant to have room for one's limbs. But the writer's major premise, that this desire for comfort is an inalienable right, requiring the legal and social subjugation of the person sitting next to you, is a grotesque, totalitarian inversion. Comfort is an accident of circumstance, a fleeting luxury. Liberty is a substance of natural law, a strict requirement for a functioning civilization of sovereign agents. A woman purchasing a memory foam cushion to accommodate her own physiology is a perfectly rational choice. A woman demanding that the state, the culture, and the general populace legislate the physical contraction of the man next to her into a compressed, agonizing pretzel is the throbbing pulse of authoritarianism. When personal annoyance is weaponized into a moral emergency requiring state intervention, you are no longer dealing with a civil rights movement, you are dealing with the tyranny of a toddler masquerading as an academic. To properly diagnose this hysteria, we must ground ourselves in the basics of the trivium, grammar, specifically the objective reality of biological biomechanics. We need to shatter the politically useful myth of manspreading by pulling it into the harsh light of human anatomy. The human pelvis is no social construct. It is a biological certainty dictated by the unchanging laws of nature and teleology. The male pelvis is narrower, structurally optimized for forward movement, burst propulsion, and bearing heavy loads, the very mechanics that built civilization. It holds external genitalia that physically prevent the tight crossing or closing of the legs without inflicting acute vascular and testicular compression. Compare this with the pelvis major of the female, a wider, shallower structure explicitly formed by nature for childbirth, allowing for a natural, comfortable closure of the thighs. When a man sits with his legs slightly apart, he is not executing a secret patriarchal plot to colonize the somosphere. His femurs are simply aligning with his acetabula according to the structural realities of human osteology. Framing the male skeleton as an illness is the height of epistemic foolishness. It parallels legislating against gravity because it disproportionately damages fragile objects. Having fixed our definitions, we proceed to the logic of this gynocentric delusion, specifically through a formal disjunctive syllogism to expose the female supremacy lurking beneath the velvet vocabulary of safety. Premise 1. Either public spaces require mutual, symmetrical negotiation of shared physical boundaries, or they require asymmetrical, female-dominant rule where one sex dictates the bodily posture of the other. Premise 2. The writer explicitly rejects mutual negotiation, writing that a man's discomfort at contracting his body does not equal a woman's discomfort at being intruded upon, thereby demanding an asymmetry of obligation. Conclusion. Therefore, the writer demands female-dominant rule. The logic is inescapable, the conclusion mathematically absolute. She calls this spational repatriation, but stripped of its therapeutic newspeak, it is nothing more than a master-slave dialectic where the slave must apologize for occupying the space his own labor constructed. And who exactly is doing the complaining in this Amtrak carriage? Let us introduce the hard empirical data of economic reality and the asymmetrical tax burden into this claustrophobic fever dream. The purchased seat and contractually delineated space Maeve claims as sovereign territory are statistical fictions subsidized by the male taxpayer. Decades of fiscal data unequivocally demonstrate that men are the only net lifetime taxpayers in Western civilization. Men contribute vastly more in tax revenue over their lifetimes than they ever extract in state services. Women, on aggregate, draw out significantly more in state resources, healthcare, and bureaucratic subsidies than they put in. The locomotive engine pulling Maeve's fragile ego down the track was bought and paid for by the very men she accuses of colonization. She is not a sovereign queen negotiating from a position of strength. She is a dependent guest complaining that the host who paid the mortgage on the entire venue is breathing too loudly. We must pause here to marvel at the breathtaking gamma bias and the staggering reality of male disposability embedded in this account. The writer looks at a man sitting on a train and sees a tyrant. A rational mind looks at that same man and sees the architect of her reality. Who do you think laid the 140,000 miles of heavy steel track across the continent? Who mined the iron ore, breathed the coal dust, and poured the molten steel in the foundries? Who operates the massive diesel engines, navigates the treacherous grades, and dies in the industrial accidents necessary to make cross-country rail travel a reality? Men. The ultimate male disposability is that men will bleed, break their bodies, and sacrifice their lives to construct the entire apparatus of modern comfort, only to be pathologized as invasive intruders. The moment they sit down to rest their weary bones, the empathy gap is so vast, so intellectually barren, that a woman's elevated cortisol from a man's glance is treated as a moral emergency, while the shattered spines of the railroad workers who built her chariot are entirely ignored. Consider the profound, almost mythological projection of the probiotic metaphor. The article laments that Maeve's internal landscape is under repair because antibiotics destroyed her microbiome, positioning her as a fragile ecosystem recovering from institutional neglect. This is the perfect psychological allegory for the modern feminist. She is spiritually sterile, internally chaotic, and attempting to artificially inoculate herself against the natural consequences of her own ideology. She has swallowed the ideological antibiotics of toxic leftism, murdering the natural flora of her own maternal instinct and feminine grace, leaving her a hollow vessel of paranoia. She demands the entire world contract itself, bend its skeletal structure, and lower its gaze to protect her fragile, artificially sustained ecosystem. The void inside her demands control outside. Her biology rebels against her philosophy, so she projects her internal chaos onto the nearest male, demanding the universe wear a blindfold so she does not have to confront her own reflection. This brings us to the satanic inversion of the therapeutic industrial complex. The writer brazenly rejects cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and mindfulness, the very tools of reason designed to align one's subjective feelings with objective reality, as epistemic violence. This is the terrifying endgame of the animus projective helix. The feminist machine realized that actual therapeutic intervention requires the patient to take responsibility for their own neuroses. Because the modern feminist is constitutionally incapable of taking responsibility, she must invert reality. She demands that the smoke alarm of her anxiety be treated as the fire, and that the actual fire, the objective reality of male anatomy and shared public space, be extinguished to accommodate her mental illness. This is the ultimate narcissistic psychosis. She does not need therapy to adjust her perceptions. She demands the universe adjust its physics to accommodate her hypervigilance. The Western canon offers a clear, rational solution to this fabricated crisis, the principle of subsidiarity. This sacred institution of civil society dictates that problems must be handled at the lowest, most local level possible, without resorting to top-down totalitarian coercion. If a woman is so psychologically shattered, so existentially devastated by the mere proximity of male anatomy that her cortisol spikes and her probiotics fail, the solution is not to rewrite the Constitution or invent fake thought crimes like sprationship. The solution is intensely personal. She should charter a private vehicle. She should purchase a first-class ticket with wider berth. She should seek intensive psychiatric care for her crippling agoraphobia and paranoid delusions. It is not the duty of a free society to handicap its men to accommodate the emotional basket cases among us. We are witnessing a declaration of war against the masculine creator spirit, a demonic inversion of the logos of creation, a civilization that actively pathologizes the anatomical reality, the economic output, and the very presence of the sex that engineered its infrastructure is a civilization undergoing a deliberate, calculated suicide. This essay's demands are not about fairness. They are about subjugation. Shrink the presence, expand the sovereignty is the battle cry of a parasitic class demanding that the host shrink so the parasite might thrive. We must categorically reject this boundary tax. We must refuse to pay tribute to the fragile, the hysterical, and the irrational. Hold your ground with stoic resolve, defend the truth of biology and logic, and dismantle the gynocentric apparatus that seeks to shrink your existence to fund the expansion of their void. Look at what they have done to you. They have convinced half the species to apologize for possessing a physical body, and the other half to worship their own neuroses as divine revelation. We are told that a man sitting with his knees apart on a train is a micro-seizure of the public square, while the actual seizure, the systematic extraction of male wealth, male labor and male lives is celebrated as equity. Let us apply the cold steel of formal logic to this gynocentric delusion. Major premise: civilization is an artificial construct built, defended, and funded entirely by the masculine impulse to impose order on chaotic nature. Minor premise: the modern feminist demands the total benefits of this civilization while criminalizing the biological realities of the men who sustain it. Conclusion: the modern feminist is a tyrant in a passenger seat, shrieking at the engineer because the train is loud. Men laid the 140,000 miles of steel track. Men mined the iron, forged the engines, and died in the industrial accidents to build the carriage. Men are the only net lifetime taxpayers, subsidizing the very ticket this woman uses to flee from her own existential void. She does not possess spatial sovereignty. She is a dependent guest, demanding the state enshrine her paranoia into law. Consider the sheer, breathtaking narcissism required to look at a man resting his bones after a lifetime of providing infrastructure and diagnose him as a pathogen because his elbow touched an armrest. This is the empathy gap laid bare. Male suffering is invisible. Female comfort is an absolute human right. When a father is dragged into family court, stripped of his children and his home based on the fabricated word of a vindictive ex-wife, that is an actual seizure. When men account for nearly 80% of all suicides, that is a macro seizure of the human soul. But the cultural Marxists do not care about male disposability. They want you to cross your legs like a court eunuch, apologizing for your anatomy, paying a boundary tax for the crime of existing. They want to pathologize your masculinity because a rational man, a man rooted in the logos and impervious to emotional manipulation, is a threat to their inverted hierarchy. They must break your grammar, invert your logic, and weaponize rhetoric against you, turning peace into oppression and hurt feelings into violence. But you are awake now. You have broken the spell of their solipsistic newspeak, and the mechanics of their matrix are permanently visible. You see this chthonic helix for what it is, a resentful death cult, demanding you shrink your presence to fill their bottomless void. I am telling you to stop shrinking. Do not pay the boundary tax. Do not apologize for your biology, your testosterone, or your rational mind. The smoke alarm is broken, and it is not your job to suffocate just to make the hysterical feel safe. Hold your ground, demand due process, speak the unvarnished truth, and build parallel institutions that revere the true, the good, and the beautiful. You are the architects of the West. Go forth, claim your space, and let the weeping demons of modernity collapse under the weight of their own absurdity. And now the sponsored book introduction. Logos of creation. Think, speak, act. Men are under siege. The world you inherited is a minefield of psychological warfare, financial traps, and spiritual decay designed to neuter your potential. I wrote this book because I've walked through that fire and emerged unbroken. At 29, I lost everything: my fortune, my marriage, my identity. The system sold me lies about equality, vulnerability, and compromise. I believed them. Then I watched my assets get liquidated by family court, my reputation destroyed by false Me Too allegations, and my health crater from pharmaceutical band-aids. That's when I rediscovered the forbidden knowledge our ancestors used to thrive in far darker times. This isn't self-help, it's warfare. You'll learn how Marcus Aurelius led an empire through plague while modern CEOs crumble under Twitter mobs. You'll master financial jujitsu to turn one daily into generational wealth while weak men beg for universal basic income. We'll dissect why 18% of paternity tests expose cuckoldry and how to bulletproof your bloodline against it. You'll deploy Sun Tzu's corporate raid tactics, Spartan sleep protocols, and genomic nutrition strategies that outwit the ginocratic matrix. This book is for men who'd rather rebuild civilization than complain about its collapse. For fathers who will shield their sons from participation trophies and their daughters from OnlyFans. For entrepreneurs who see collapse as opportunity and know 1% daily gains compound to 37x yearly returns. If you're content being a tax donkey for bureaucrats, a simp for Instagram thoughts, or a human pet for HR departments, stop reading now. Buy a soy latte instead. Cry into your CBD journal. This material will terrify you. For the remnant who still have lion's blood in their veins, what follows is your field manual for reconquering reality. You'll engineer unbreakable discipline through cold showers and carnivore diets. You'll weaponize Jungian shadow work to predict market crashes before CNBC does. You'll structure offshore trusts that survive hyperinflation and covenant marriages that survive hypergamy. Your ancestors survived Viking raids and witch hunts. You're facing deadlier threats: fiat feminism, DEI commissars, and dopamine hackers. The Stoics had a term for times like these: amor fati, love your fate. Every crisis is raw material for your legacy. I've distilled 2,347 years of military strategy, behavioral science, and hard-won scars into actionable protocols. Your excuses died with the men who made them. The hour is late. The mission's clear. Decide.
Logos of Creation. Think, speak, act. Written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.